Gentlemen, welcome to the planning board meeting, town of Amenia. We'll start with pledge allegiance.
Yep.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If anyone would like to speak at a public hearing, sign up. There's 2 sign-up lists over there. Please sign up if you want to sign up to the public hearing on Trout Pack or the Vinsky's windows. You sign up to the public hearing, please. Line's on. I'm good. All right. Our first public hearing is going to be Troutbeck Phase 8 Indoor Pool, 115 Leedsville Road. Public hearing is now open. Is there anyone signed up to talk about on the public hearing for Troutbeck at this present time? I want to see if there's anyone. Judy, please.
Sure. Okay, I'm gonna look at the other list. No one is on there yet.
No one's on there yet? Okay. We'll
We
give it.
don't have anything here from Troutbeck to present, so.
So, that is that then.
Well, we can always table it and go to the next person.
Gonna give it a couple minutes and see what happens.
Okay, you're the boss.
No, I'm just the chair. It takes 4 or 8 of us to make this happen properly. I just run the meeting. All right, as I see there's no public hearing, what should I do at this point since there's no one here?
I would just go ahead and continue the public hearing
All right,
You have it?
for the
Okay.
first meeting in January.
at this present time, we're going to continue the public hearing at the first meeting in January. Second public hearing is, we're going to close the we'll leave the public hearing open to January, correct?
January
January
Do we need a motion on that?
8th, sure. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we move the public hearing on the Troutbeck Indoor Pool, Phase 8, until January
8th.
8th.
Need a second?
I'll second the motion to continue.
All in favor? Aye. Public hearing number 2 is the Vinci window sign application 3430 Route 343 Amenia, New York. Public hearing is now open.
Can you, John, or Paul, or applicant, just give a little summary of the Da Vinci application, what happened, what it is?
Sure.
Thanks.
There
I can
was
do
a communication from the Dutchess County.
Yes,
on the
from
sign.
today.
Right.
So basically what we have here is, just give me a second to grab my memo if you wouldn't mind, please.
Go ahead.
And of course, why can't I find it? I want to. Thank you. It's here, I know that. So the project is located in the Hamlet Mixed-Use Zoning District. What it is, it's an existing single-family residential structure they want to convert into a mixed use. They wanted to put an apartment on the upper level and basically a retail space, which is essentially a window showroom. It's not a lot of public, but if you were to order windows, you would go there. The proposed use is permitted by right, subject to site plan review by the planning board. However, the town code has a little hook that says you can kind of waive that if it's an existing structure and it's a use permitted by right, except for the fact that they have a sign proposed. They made a submission on the sign. And as a consequence, they're also located on a state highway, so it needed to be referred to the county. The application is otherwise complete. The county came back and they said it was a matter of local concern, but they identified an issue with the sign that quite honestly, Mike and I missed. Apparently the sign was originally proposed as internally illuminated. It was a nice sign, everybody liked it, but they had an LED light strip that ran inside basically the face of the sign so that the letters would be illuminated. That is not permitted by our sign code. So as a consequence, Mike Segelkin, the building inspector, and Judy had a conversation with the applicant. The applicant has gone back and revised the sign, eliminating the internal illumination. They're proposing external illumination, and they say either from above or below. But our code, again, is somewhat peculiarly worded, and it says you can't direct your light to the sky. So technically speaking, that means you can only do from above. So if we advise the applicant, he'll have to change that note, and the sign can be illuminated from above. There are other provisions, and quite honestly, I don't normally do signs, and I didn't have a chance to talk to Mike because he was out of the office today at training, but the sign appears to otherwise comply. The square footage on their submittal says 14.2. If you read our sign code, it really just applies to the area where the letters are, which is a little over 12 feet. So, and the maximum in this is 16. So it's a complying sign. The rest of it, there's really no physical changes to the project site. So it's really just a conversion of an existing house, and they're adding a window showroom to the lower level. And I think the owner was here last time, he may be here this time as well, and I think his suggestion was it's people are gonna basically need appointments and other things to get there, so it's not like it's a high volume traffic matter.
Right.
I think that about covers it.
Sure, okay, so based on what you just said, I think what we need is a revised plan that shows where the lighting is gonna be
Yes.
above the sign that's pointed down, because the plan that we have in front of us still has the red LED light strip in it, and so I guess that's a plan revision. There were also, I know, some questions about where the sign was located near the driveway in terms of sight lines. and
Mike
that sort of
actually
thing.
went out there and said he didn't have a problem with it. He
Okay.
did verify that, so he was satisfied with that.
All right. And then as a showroom, are there going to be truck deliveries to and from that facility, or is it really just a showroom?
I don't,
Zero.
Zero, okay. You're just like, it's just a showroom, nobody's ordering a bunch of windows?
Off-site meeting room.
Okay, all right.
Aesthetically, internal lighting looks better than external lighting.
Well,
And I believe the last line of the county communication said, but the local, it was something to the effect of, but you have the right to do what you wish. It was something to that effect. I don't have it in front of me.
Exactly what it is.
Okay, so also, you will end up using probably less light, less power by lighting interior than you have to do by lighting with a reflective surface. So, I mean, I understand why they're saying that, but if we want to up the beauty and the aesthetics of the area, we'd say, how do we allow them to have the prettier sign?
I am not going to disagree with you, but unfortunately, if you read your code carefully, there are no provisions for this board to waive those provisions. They'd have to go get a variance, which I'm not sure, I mean, they're free to do that, but there's no good way to do it. It might be simpler to go with the colored glass and light it externally.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong, but it's such a small application, I'll defer to them, but it can't happen without a variance.
Okay, and this is going forward too, as we talk more about signs.
As a matter of consistency also, we've had other establishments before us, and we had to make sure they complied with regulations. So if we make exceptions, we're opening up a Pandora's box, I think.
But the opportunity does exist, as John just said, that you can go for a variance. And those of us who believe that it's better to have something that looks better than something that is from code 20,000 years ago, we'll go there and support you.
Okay, at this time we have Vivian, you want to come up and speak, please? Come up to the podium, state your name, and
Nancy. Oh,
Vivian, stay at the podium, yes, please.
okay.
Vivian Berlinghoff, and I'm a neighbor, I guess it would be to the West. And I just would like to go on record and say I never got the certified letter. So I'm not sure. My billing address, I do pay my taxes. It's the right same mailing. So just luckily signs out there, so I appreciate that. But that's why I'm here a little late. I would have come to try and see the site plan. So my concerns are visibility. We do have a lot there that we would like to develop at some point. So I'd love to see where the sign is and if it creates a visibility. I do have a plan that I did years ago with Amenia, and I went in front of the board with it and sort of for a structure. And at that point, for a driveway, when I met with the state in the letters I had to have curbing and a waiver from special use permit for the wetlands there in the wetland buffer. And I'm concerned that there's a blacktop driveway now in the wetland buffer that went in, which you're not supposed to fill. So that's concerning to me. And then also the property line, there's debris on my property from this property, which I took pictures today, and the sheriff's been out there, has contacted the owner. But it's just, as a neighbor and being in this community my whole life, I just wanted to have a pause here. I mean, I support business, I support uses, I just, you know, it has to be fair.
I'm sorry, ma'am, could you repeat that last section? What's on your property? I didn't catch it.
Debris, there's some trees on the property line that were taken down
Okay,
without permission, and they're on my property right now, just laying in a pile.
okay.
What is your name again?
Vivian Burlinghoff.
Okay,
So
thank you, Vivian.
I know that this was always presented as a,
Dean, can you get your mic on, please?
it's on. Can you hear me now?
Closer, yeah. Good.
So is that the
I know
commission?
that this was presented to this board as a renovation of an existing structure, but it appears as though it's a full new build, maybe on the same footprint, but it was not exactly a renovation of an existing structure. I mean, just from purely driving by, I don't have any.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't drive by. I relied on what Mike told me.
Okay.
So I didn't realize that.
So I think, you know, given what Vivian has said, I think maybe there does need to be a bit of a pause on the process for this, and the, you know, whether or not Mike was, you know, went out there, whatever. I think the wetland, building the blacktop driveway in the wetland buffer is also kind of a concern, so.
I don't see any wetlands out there, so it's not shown on any
Yeah.
mapping.
It's shown on parcel access.
Not
It's
on the piece
DEC and federal, and it's a 100-foot buffer from both. You guys also have a stream corridor that's been added since the last time I knew about the zoning. I don't know what that stream corridor states. Does anyone here on your zoning? If that might have a buffer too. That's new to me from when I had my delineation done.
So I don't think that we were specifically asked, that John was asked to review this as a site plan, only really the sign portion of the site plan. But
But I did
Maybe it's
do
worth
some
doing
basic
that.
research. I'll go back and do it again. I didn't, you know, I typically print out, and I didn't see any wetlands on there, but I will check it, and whatever, I'll report back to the board.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just one more thing, just another concern, is the septic pre-existing, were any improvements made? I just need to know again, because my well is right on that line.
I'll have to have a chat with Mike, because normally I don't involve
I need to be
myself in all
100
that.
feet from a septic.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
Okay. I'm Nancy McKenzie, and I live on Sheffield Road. I have a different issue, and I think of more concern, because the sign will be right at the obstructed part of 343. Where do I start? We moved there in 2016, and 2019, until 2019, I had to clear the bushes on the corner of Sheffield and 343 so that you could see around, okay, the
It's a
curve.
bad spot.
In order to, okay, so there've been multiple accidents there. So I cleaned it from 2016 to 2019, and then the highway department put bricks down from 2019 to 2024 in order to keep the vegetation down because it's an obstructed view. I did a little really crummy chart, and I will show you that the sign is right at the crux of. Okay, so there are two issues. I mean, well, no, there's only one issue, but the reason the 1 and 2 is here is most people will come and go to the stop sign, and they will look left, and they will see nothing, and they will pull out. And what they didn't see is right here where the sign is going to be.
Can you lift it up a little more? Okay, cool,
Okay.
thank you.
Right here where the sign is going to be, okay, is obstructed unless you actually, and I think there are actually people in this room that can confirm this, unless you actually push your car out into the road and look to the left, can you see a car coming. So there have been multiple accidents there. So this is the stop sign, and you can see, you don't see it. I have to go out all the way to the road in order to look around to see if a car is coming. So that's why there's so many accidents, right? I mean, people look and then they think, oh, okay, and they start to pull out, right? Or they wait for another car and they figure that's fine, and they pull out and bam. Because if they don't look a second time, right, the car will hit them. Is that clear?
Yes,
It's
yes,
indeed.
yeah.
So the statute says that an obstructed view is not allowed with this kind of Article 7, 12139. You cannot put up a sign that will obstruct a view. This view is already obstructed. This is just going to add more obstruction. And since there's so many accidents, I mean, Megan Chamberlain can confirm that there are multiple accidents. When we have people visit us, we say, when you go out, you have to pull all the way down almost into the road, and then look and make sure that you don't see a car coming. Because if they leave the town, and then they go into this cul-de-sac, which is where this sign is going to be, right? And then they think they're free. So we consider it a really dangerous intersection, and so does the highway department. So a sign, right, I mean, and it's right there. Also, I take issue with statements like a restored sign. There was never any sign there. And this was a restored building. That building was trash.
It was a barn.
So, you know, it's little things like that unnerve me about the efficiency of having meetings when people don't tell the truth in their original application. So,
Nancy, how do you spell your last name?
McKenzie.
Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for public comment? Well, you're supposed to sign up, you were.
Oh, I am, okay.
So you
It
can't
doesn't
go
matter,
there.
go ahead.
I know you are.
Well, I didn't sign up because I didn't really have a question until Nancy
Go
spoke. My
ahead.
name is Craig Miley, resident of Amenia. One thing I like to point out about that sign being there is that it's also a 50-mile-an-hour speed zone. So people are flying around that corner.
Okay.
So take that in consideration. And also, one question, what is the dimensions of the sign? Because I think the law in Amenia
16
is that
square.
can be
The
like
dimensions
30
are
by 30.
varied, they're on there, and it does meet the requirements.
It's here, you can take a look if you want. So the sign it looks like this.
Right?
It is 6 feet in dimension this way from end to end, and just shy of 2 feet.
Okay.
Here, and based on our code, the sort of the framing, this internal circle and square, if everyone can see that, isn't counted in the calculation for area. Only the portion of the sign that has letters or numbers on it. And so based on our code, which I think is a 16 square foot max
Yes.
for the informational portion of the sign, this meets it, right, 6 by 2, essentially. 6 by 2.
I thought the dimensions of signs in town were supposed to be like 30. I know the sign for my farm, it's like 30 by 30. 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet was like this, the biggest sign you could have for a business. I mean,
no.
that was a while ago, so
Yeah.
maybe things have changed, but I mean, 6 feet, so it's 6 feet in length.
6 feet in length.
That's like a billboard then. Okay.
Our code allows
16 square feet.
a sign to be 16 square feet.
Okay.
So something that's 6 by
It's in
2 meets the
compliance.
4 by 4.
code.
All right. But-
Here's a little, if you want some more sort of renderings of what this will look like.
Well, just take into consideration that it is a 50-mile-an-hour zone right there.
Yeah.
And people, I mean, I pull out of my gate road. I mean, I'm not telling anyone anything here. It's a dangerous intersection.
Yeah, it's a bad spot.
Either way, if you're going toward Sharon or pulling out of Sheffield Road, you got to go and, can't hesitate, so, Okay.
Also,
Is it-
there's also, just to, dovetail on what you're saying, there's a blind spot there
Right.
because there's a sharp hill. And those people coming off 343, coming up that hill, you don't see traffic coming at you. And I've almost been,
been a problem too.
yeah, well, I've almost been clipped there as well because someone's on my side of the road. It's a
Well,
blind,
that's-
it's a blind spot.
Yeah, it's a whole another issue too, you know what I mean, the intersection.
Yeah.
So, besides the sign.
I mean,
Yeah.
how if
All right.
you were in New York City, you should be
You
on
can't,
the road.
you got to either go to the mic or sign up again. Okay, I think we're good.
Yes, go ahead.
It's on.
Go ahead.
My name is Gay Parise, and I live on Bog Hollow. And when we first built our house 40 years ago, because it's a county road, we didn't have proper sight line to get out of our driveway. So the county made us, we practically had to use dynamite to get part of the entrance to the driveway out of the way so you can see left and right. And there is a dip in the road coming from the Kent side, so if you don't look twice, I'm pulled out many times in
Another bad
40
spot.
years where someone is going really fast, and we were able to get the county to lower the speed on the road to 40. Bog Hollow is 40 miles per hour, which I still think is a little fast, but I think 50 for that road going into town, approaching town, is very fast. And I think the county needs to do something about that intersection. If that many accidents how many accidents? 10, 15 since you've been there? Yeah, 10. That many accidents, the county should do something about it. It's
a state road.
The state road, the state east should do something about it. Take away a portion of the edge of the road there so you can see, so you can create vision. And that's what I'm thinking as well. I mean, I don't know about a sign, I don't know where that is, but if it's a problem,
Well, it's right at the blind spot, so it just magnifies the blindness.
yeah. Well, you can take care of, all that stuff can be taken care of. Lower the speed and pull away the material to make a wider view shed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Anything else for the public hearing? Anything?
Do you want to continue it? Is that what the board?
Mr. Chairman,
think
what
so.
I would offer is, I don't understand the issues because it's quite a distance from the intersection, this property. So I'm going to go out there and take a look.
Yes.
I would, if I were you, I would continue the public hearing. I'll make arrangements to talk with both Megan and Mike, and I will report back to you at the next meeting.
We're going to continue the public hearing to January 8th. I need a motion to continue the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Need a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so carries then. There we go.
And in the meantime, you'll submit a revised plan to show where the lights are going to be. Okay.
Thank you.
And one thing I would suggest to those who are talking about the speed is come to the town board and tell them, because it's a state issue, and they can talk about approaching the state
DOT.
to DOT to reduce the speed there. Yeah,
Maybe.
I agree, but it's that much closer that, you know.
Okay, we're moving on. We're going to the regular meeting. Cascade Creek subdivision, Hudson River housing. It's going to be first on the agenda. And I'm going to start out with you, sir.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention, I apologize.
We're going into the regular meeting.
Okay?
Cascade Creek subdivision, Hudson River housing.
Okay.
First.
Give me a second to get to that file. So this is actually the first time this is in front of you.
Yes.
I issued a preliminary kind of comment memo because it's one of these things where we're going to need some guidance from the board, and I think the applicant's going to need some guidance, and they started out relatively simply. So what they're proposing is the project site is in the suburban residential zoning district. It's at 34 Cascade Road, and they're proposing a conservation subdivision, which is allowable under your code. And what they're proposing is 28 individual lots, 3 conservation lots, approximately 1,300 feet of road, connecting both to Cascade Road and New York State Route 82, and then a short cul-de-sac. The overall project, they're proposing to develop an on-site common water system and an on-site common or municipal wastewater disposal system. And they are, as a consequence, the 3 conservation lots total about 14.4 acres, which is reputed to be about 59% of the lot. It's a major subdivision. We would recommend that you pursue it as a major subdivision. And what they've asked for is a conservation subdivision. So following the procedures that are set in your code, as a conservation subdivision, they need to submit a conservation analysis, which they have done. It was part of this application. They submitted a preliminary long-form EAF, and they've submitted a proposed sketch plan, which embodies their basic proposal. And what ends up happening is the process that's established for a conservation subdivision excuse me, requires that the planning board, once you deem the conservation analysis is complete, you issue a set of findings, which you've done on other projects. Those findings then get crafted and embodied into the proposed subdivision. And once that is complete, once you have a conservation analysis with findings and a sketch plan, then you would go down the seeker path, and that's when you would look for the EAF and any additional information you may need. So with that setting, couple comments I have. The application and supporting documentation indicate a parcel acreage of 24.13 acres. One of the things that is unique to the conservation subdivision is there's a formula, and that formula starts from what the property acreage is. If you look at the deed and the reference filed map, they don't identify 24.13 acres. The tax map shows 18, which are notoriously famous for maybe not being necessarily correct. The filed map that's referenced is kind of inconclusive. It says 20 plus or minus acres. However, in the chain of deeds, you go back to the second prior deed, and it references a survey by Lyndon Chase that says it's 24.13 acres. We don't have any documentation. So the first thing that we're going to need from the applicant is clear and documentable evidence of the 24.13 acres. So we would need that survey. They've also seen fit to take a credit for workforce housing. They're proposing, I think it's 100% workforce housing, all exceed 2-bedroom, so they're claiming the maximum credit of 50%. I have no argument with that, but it's just a reminder, any application that's for a subdivision, site plan, or anything else that deals with workforce housing, you have to refer to the housing board. I would defer to Paul as to when you refer it, but I think you need to get down the road a little bit and maybe make the conservation findings and have a sketch plan so you know what it is you're referring to them. So that may be down the road a little bit. The unique thing here, they're proposing common water and sewer. Common water and sewer allows the applicant to shrink the lot sizes. The minimum lot size is that set forth, and the bulk regulations are those set forth in one of the hamlet districts. And in this case, if they have both common water and common sewer, you can shrink the lots down to about 8,000 square feet, which is kind of the basics of their proposal. However, those things get finalized as you move through. So in other words, once you decide to go a conservation subdivision, you would have some input as to what you would like to see the minimum lot size would be, what you would like to see the bulk regulations to be, and then you would use the pattern established for the hamlets, but you have some latitude, and they would be embodied in the final plat. The common water and sewer facilities, there's a strict requirement that you folks have to make a determination that whoever owns and operates those facilities will do so in the public's interest, if you will. So there's an argument to be made that we need to know what those entities are going to be, whether they would be municipal water and sewer districts or whether they would be transportation corporations. All that has to be developed as the project moves forward. Another minor issue, they have 2 flag lots. Flag lots are covered under a specific section of the code. Flag lots are only allowed by express waiver of the planning board to be granted in your sole discretion. That being said, they have to make a case to allow flag lots, which needs to be advanced. They will need Dutchess County Department of Health approval for the water supply and wastewater disposal. In addition, it looks like their proposed discharge, a total of 12,320 gallons per day, is going to require that they get covered by a speedies permit. Now, New York State DEC has the pleasure of covering it under the general permit, because there are multiple outfalls proposed, or in some cases they go right and require them to get an individual permit. That's something that's going to have to be identified and developed. They are going to disturb more than an acre, so we're going to need a stormwater pollution prevention plan. There's some requirements for the valley bottom aquifer. There's a new town road, so we ought to probably have some discussions with the town highway superintendent and the town board, because you're going to, ultimately, it's going to be yours to accept. And then they're going to need, there's a stream on the property, and they're going to need a DEC protection of waters permit for the stream crossing. Those are just some of the basics, and I just wanted to kind of set those out there because they kind of frame what needs to be generated going forward. And when it comes to reviewing the conservation analysis, I started going down that road. There's not a lot of issues with this property, because some of you may be very familiar with it. There's a stream on one side along Cascade Road. It's I guess, pretty well defined, although they didn't give us any topography. And then the rest of it has been open farmed fields. So there's not a lot going on in terms of protections, other than the fact that the soils are state protected soils and farming soils. So that, but other than that, it's really going to be an exercise by you folks determining what's important and how you want to see this go. And then I suspect the applicants here, and you might want to hear from them, because I talk too much.
If I recall, it's a 100-year floodplain there?
According to the documentation, sir, there is none associated with that particular stream. Now, I didn't get into it in detail, but they did submit a firm map, and it doesn't show any floodplain associated with this. And I think it's the fact that I think the stream is close to the road, but it's a pretty narrow bed and banks through there.
Correct.
So it's pretty well channeled. So
I can remember when Cascade Road was underwater a number of years. So I'm surprised because I know a number of properties, when we did have flooding there, had water in their basements.
it's something you may have to explore going forward, but the basic information submitted to date would suggest that that is not an issue for FEMA.
Okay.
Judy, would you read the letter out from Mike Singleton, please?
I'm sorry?
You got the letter from Mike Singleton, did you?
Yes, we did.
Would you read that off?
Give me a second to find it, and I can read it for you. You got it?
Yeah.
Can you read it?
You have a microphone.
Okay. So we have a letter from Mike Segelkin dated December 9th, 2024. It's written to Amenia Engineering, care of the Cascade Creek subdivision, and it says, it reads as follows: to whom it may concern. I have questions after reviewing the Hudson River housing proposal from Amenia Engineering, calling for 28 1/4 acre lots for the Cascade Creek subdivision. The proposal is stating that there are 24 acres in the parcel, and Dutchess County Parcel Access states that there are only 18 acres. The property is in the SR zone, parens, suburban residential, close parens, and per the Town of Amenia zoning code 121-11, the minimum lot size is 1 acre, and minimum density is 1 acre per dwelling unit. The proposal calls for 13 acres for 28 houses, and 14 acres is open space. He gets that to be 27, not 24 or 18. He defers to me for the density calculations and final acreage sizes of his subdivision. Per the specifications in your proposed lot size above pertaining to the proposed subdivision versus the regulations of the Town of Amenia zoning code, it is my opinion as a code enforcement officer that the proposal is prohibited. If you should have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to contact me. He provides his number. Sincerely, Mike Segelkin. In certain aspects, Mike is correct, but as I said, they've proposed this as a conservation subdivision, which is a permissible use. So if they follow all the steps, pass all the points, you can ultimately approve this as a conservation subdivision.
Right. Yeah, and the only thing I would add, because I want to support what John was saying, and I think it's implicit in what Mike is saying as well, we need to know accurately what is the size of the parcel, because all things spring from there in terms of the zoning. And then in terms of the conservation process, as we did with Keene Stud, I would
Stop for a minute until he gets back,
Oh, sure.
please.
What are we looking to come out of tonight with regarding this particular, is this just for discussion?
Yeah, it's not even, it's not open for discussion in the public yet, but we can discuss it amongst ourselves.
I think
Okay.
it's open for discussion between the planning board and the applicant who are here. They're better proponents for their project than I would be.
Yeah.
So, and I think they've probably got more answers than I might have at this point.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to what John had said is I would agree that waiting until you get beyond your conservation findings and you basically say to them, because the next step is to say, okay, we like your sketch plan, bring in a preliminary plat. At that point, that seems like an appropriate time to send this over to the housing board.
Okay, I have, just before they start, one, for a lot of people who are here, I'm sure they're here for this particular.
Sure they are.
So, just so they know, this is not the forum where they're going to get to
Speak, yeah.
speak.
They will have their chance.
Right, just
For sure.
so they know that.
Go ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. Peter Sander, representing the applicant, HRH. So John pretty much hit all my details and bullet points on here, so I just wanted to provide a little additional technical information. So the layout for this subdivision has been designed so that it avoids sensitive wooded areas. So as John had stated, that most of the project site is open fields. There is a small tract of woods in the center of the project site, and then a perimeter outer vegetated area. We thought that this layout actually preserves the screening aspect of that vegetation sited inside the fields and also within the lower portion of the project site. So I just thought that was important. So it will be assistant screening from Cascade and Route 22. And then just to point out that right now, what we have designed it for is being constructed into 4 separate phases with 7 lots per phase. That's more for the applicant's benefit so that as they find workforce housing applicants for this site, they can construct 7 lots at a time, 7 lots at a time, 7 lots at a time, 7 lots at a time. And the system behind it, the subsurface sewage disposal system, has also been designed so that it can also be constructed with those phases. And then overall, I just wanted to highlight that within our conservation analysis report, we also included a biologist study examining the site for threatened and endangered species, which they determined that there were none. They also determined that there were no wetlands. And then also as part of our due diligence, we contracted Hudson Cultural Service to do the archaeological study of the site. So they went out there and did shovel tests looking for archaeological sensitive artifacts. We found none, so we thought that that was a good sign, clear to proceed, that there was no particular area that was a place that we needed to avoid. And then just in support of the conservation finding statement, we think that this layout does preserve the most conservation important resources on the site, being the wooded areas and sensitive viewshed along Route 22. And with that, John again hit most of my bullet points, so I'm going to hand this off to Mary Lynn, who is the HRH and will tell you more about this awesome project.
Good evening. I'm Mary Ling. I'm with Hudson River Housing. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate Development and Housing Counseling. Hudson River Housing is a nonprofit real estate developer that has created over 1,400 units of housing, both rental and homeownership opportunities. Hudson River Housing also operates the NeighborWorks Homeownership Center of Dutchess County, which is an innovative approach to providing all the services and training that customers need in one location to shop for, purchase, rehabilitate, insure, and maintain a home. HRH is a housing counseling agency that is certified by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development and NeighborWorks Center for Housing Education and Counseling. To date, our center staff have assisted over 1,200 households in achieving the dream of homeownership. We are proud and excited to propose the creation of a 28-lot subdivision to build 28 units of workforce housing, all single-family homes to be sold to first-time homebuyers. As Peter mentioned, our proposal has the subdivision being surrounded by acres of conserved open space that will also be surrounded by tree-lined perimeter that already exists.
Yeah. And we're, again, happy to answer any of the board's questions on this.
We also did a traffic study that came back with no impact on the traffic generally, which we can supply to the planning board.
That'd be helpful.
I have, for the record, I live on Cascade Mountain Road. I drive past that every day. maybe a quarter to slightly more, just northwest, I guess, of that. I applaud everything you've done with affordable housing. In Amenia, there are 490 people out of 3,900 who live at or below the poverty level. I would love affordable housing. Workforce housing, I'm going, who is this for? I've gone back to the zoning code, and I see it's for people who work in the area, people who, you know, volunteers, firemen, teachers. The difference between housing and work and affordable, as you know, is a 10% difference. It's very roughly 10%, between 20 and 30%, as I read the standard definitions. So many things trouble me about this. The HRH narrative talks about affordable housing in 80% of its references, and only 2 or 3 represent workforce housing. I looked at your website. I saw a lot of affordable housing. I didn't see that much in workforce housing, just going through. So what experiences do you have with workforce housing? And these are rhetorical. I looked at pictures you have. I don't see developments that you've developed. In line with that, I've looked at the firm you're going to build the houses. They're in Scranton, Pennsylvania. They're modular. They'll be trucked in. And you're using a Poughkeepsie contractor to assemble them. Why not Amenia contractors? If this is workforce, why aren't we saying that we want to make sure the people of Amenia are given the first opportunity to get jobs? I don't see any mention of that. It's a good place for workforce to build in the community. I have about 25, 30 other comments. I'll put them down and I'll submit it to the board, and they can submit it to you. A lot of these are, yeah, you may not have an environmental impact on that creek, which flows through my property, but you go about 200 feet down the creek, the Housatonic Valley River, whatever that was, in May of this year, talked about the E. coli right beyond the liquor store being about 1,000 times higher than the EPA recommended. So anything, you start paving that area, it rains like today, that water's going to go somewhere, and it's going to go into water that is already fragile. You put the houses along the creek, the water body. Where's the water going to go? Where's someone who has grass cuttings going to throw their grass cuttings? On the street? I don't think so. So I think if this were affordable housing, God bless you. Let's find a way to make it all work. It's workforce. I have a few more challenges. But I don't want to see Levittown across from, and I know you don't. And that's in the comprehensive plan. But have you looked at the images on the builder's website of ranch houses? It looks like the 2024 version of a suburban neighborhood. And there's something in particular, let's see if I have it here, market rate. There are a couple of things also I would ask both John and Paul to look at. In the zoning code, it talks about workforce housing being a part, basically not being sole workforce housing development. I'll find the reference in the code, it's in 121 somewhere, and pass it on to you. The last thing I want to say is regarding the housing board. They've already discussed this. They've already put out letters of interest to submit to the public. So saying that we'll refer it to the housing board, I think they have to explain to us what they've already offered the public, because someone's going to be awful pissed off for good reason. And what we need to do is make sure that we understand the process is equitable, and as mandated by our code, by helping you achieve aims that will address the concerns of the town of Amenia. And I know that your organization has the will to do that. So that's that.
You have any questions?
Well, I just actually I think generally we use the term affordable and workforce interchangeably, but if there is a difference in the income bands. Maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about how you make the decision, income limits, income requirements for those that would qualify for this, and the financial structure of that, and then maybe a little bit to Ken's point, if you, Hudson River Housing, have a different definition for workforce versus affordable, and how that might impact affordability and eligibility.
Sure. Thank you. So we don't, I think you're right. I mean, the words workforce and affordable housing are just used interchangeably. I'm not working off of any definition that would be two different types of housing. This housing is going to be for households under 80% of the area median income for Dutchess County and below. So that,
And that right now, the AMI for Dutchess County for a household of 4 persons is what, in the $80,000 range, something like that?
for 4 people? Let me look that up.
Yeah, for one, it's 40,000, and that 80% is the workforce housing definition.
Right, so, and our code does not differentiate between the definition of workforce housing versus affordable housing. I think they're generally considered to be one and the same. I think it's just a matter of semantics rather than a matter of like eligibility requirements.
I disagree slightly with
Okay.
you because,
I don't know, it's
well,
more of a question.
there's a lower threshold to get into the housing if you are affordable. It's
Lower-
20, it's
who sets
20%.
that threshold? We
Who
do.
said that?
We do, our code sets
They
that?
differ, I'll have to go back and
Okay.
look at who differentiated, but the definition is a 30% for workforce and 20% for affordable.
All right, so Mary, so
Seniors,
given
for
that,
instance.
is that something that you guys can take a look at if our code defines workforce versus affordable differently? Can you evaluate what that means in terms of eligibility and the AMI?
Sure. So I would need to know what the town's definition of affordable is.
Peter can find that in the code if that's, yeah.
Okay.
I have one question about law. Is there any other location in this town this can be had? Like Wausau Developmental Center?
State School Road, exactly right. There's 4 acres down there.
There's 400 some acres just sitting there the state of New York's not doing anything with.
Right. That is a plan, there is a plan in the works that the state's aware of and that they've had discussions with in town here about building 200 units of affordable housing, I would say. That will be coming our way within the year.
So what was the name of this road?
St. Pat's Road, it's off of St. Pat's, it's ORMDD, state of New York.
Oh, okay.
There's a perfect place for affordable housing, around the train station, you name it.
They even have their
It's got
own
sewer
water
systems
treatment plant.
there, any need, it's there. This is my opinion. I know the law says you can do what you can do, and I get it. You gotta understand that people, the law says we can do, and we can't do. That's the bottom line to all this. The law says we can do this, we have no other choice to move forward. But there's other options in this town, which we should be able to look at also. This is my opinion.
So we want to work with the town, we want to work with the community, we want everyone to
I
be,
just think there's a whole development that's been closed since 1994, but has not been touched.
Right.
is this part of the 10-mile plan?
Yes,
Yeah.
We've been working
yes.
with the developers of that plan since its inception, but it's not gone anywhere. I mean, we've been,
It's politics of the state of New York, unfortunately, but
and we think affordable housing is needed now.
I
So-
get it.
No question.
And we think this is a good location for it. And again, but we want to hear what people have to say, we want to talk it through, we want to make it happen, we want to make it work.
Right.
We're not here to
Oh,
bully
I
our
understand
way
that.
in, by any means.
And
But on the same note, as far as affordability and things, it costs a certain amount of money to build a house.
Definitely.
Using the modular approach is a bit of a savings to stick-built, but we are pricing both. The decision to go one way or the other has not been finally determined, and I invite people to understand that this is a process, right?
Of course.
And there's going to be a lot of changes as we go, and a lot of decisions, and a lot of give and take. And we're here for the long haul to do that, but we also have been in this region recognizing the need for affordable and workforce housing, and it just needs to get constructed. And so, but again, affordability, it depends on how much these are going to end up being cost to build, and then what stream of income households can afford a mortgage. I mean, as it is right now, and again, this is subject to change, but in this instance, it's only subject to change to be more, but we're offering $217,000 plus of subsidy and down payment assistance for each house to make it affordable to, right now, under 80%, households that are under 80% of the area median income for Dutchess County. So again, the affordability and the numbers mean a lot. They need to work. We're not going to set people up for failure. So we have to make sure that the folks that we are selling these houses to can afford them, and it's not going to be a burden on them, it's not going to be a hardship on them, that it's all going to work for everyone. So we will look at these definitions and what the AMIs are and see what that might do to our mix of.
Can you explain just how does HRH work vis-a-vis the town? Because the town code says that the rental price is determined by the town board, the ability to resell your house is determined by the town board, the sale price is determined by the town board. That's in our code. And given that the town board's already overextended, they can assign this to, I guess, the housing board. What role is HRH the owner of this? Do they own the property? Are they're
HRH
purchasing?
will own this property and be the sellers of the houses, and we are the administrators of the down payment assistance grants for 20 years. So we have to be the ones that are doing what you just described.
Right, and the board then, town board, by resolution authorizes you to do that? Is that how that
No,
works?
so I think what you're referring to is there was an amendment to the code, to our zoning code. It's an addendum that sort of revises that whole section of the code because town board can't be in the business of doing that, nor do they have the bandwidth to do it. So there's an addendum to the code that was passed, I don't know if anybody remembers, like what? Yeah, a year ago or so?
Yeah.
I'll have to get that,
Yeah,
because
get
I
that.
don't have that.
So disregard that whole.
Okay.
There's new language that updates that provision.
And I don't want to upset anybody's apple cart, but I think you have to kind of, in your minds, somewhat bifurcate the process that we've just started down. Process number one is they have made application for a conservation subdivision.
Gotcha.
That is what's in front of you. They, by nature of who they are and what they're doing, the affordability is second. But they don't even get to the affordability issue until we wrestle with the conservation subdivision. And truth be told, conservation subdivision, somebody with a lot of money could come in and do the same thing. And I'm going to say Keen Stud because Peter's familiar with it. That's one of the things that we toyed with Keen Stud on. Why aren't you doing a conservation subdivision to save the open space? So here you have someone who's coming in to save the open space and do what they believe in crafting a conservation subdivision. So the first task you have to wrestle to the ground is, does this even make sense as a conservation subdivision? And while you're doing that, of course, behind the scenes, all the affordability issues, which I don't profess to understand or want to understand. I got enough trouble understanding water, sewer, and drainage. So, but I would suggest that not to dilute the subdivision conservation analysis with getting too far down the road on the affordability issues. I really think we need to focus on this. Does this even make good sense? So in other words, does the conservation analysis that they've submitted, they've got a traffic study. It would be nice to see the traffic study because that's 28 houses in that little neck of the woods seems like a big bump for some of you folks. But, so I think you have to, in your minds, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but bifurcate it and deal with what application that's in front of you, which is for a conservation subdivision. The other issues will fall out as this moves forward, one would think.
There is one item that I think, as part of the conservation analysis, that I didn't see in the package. That doesn't mean that it wasn't there, but there needs to be a per lot calculation for impervious coverage. Did I miss that? Is that not,
Yeah.
is that in the package?
That's part of the EAF, and if you look actually on the phase-in construction plan, this
Okay.
one right here,
Yeah.
you do a per lot calculation for impervious surface.
And it's the same for every lot?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they kind of,
It's more to generalize and give a general estimate of that impervious for
Okay.
per lot.
Okay.
it's going to have to be enhanced going forward.
Yeah, you're going to have to do lot by lot. I think that's required
Ultimately,
in the
yes.
code, but
There's a lot, but they're just at the sketch plan
Yeah.
phase. And, you
I
know,
think it would be helpful to better understand, for me to better understand the layout of this if you gave us the lot
I got a question.
impervious by lot, but nevertheless,
So-
but understand that can be
Just
deferred.
to clarify, what it does entail is that because these are going to be stock houses, that we would incorporate a driveway and a building being constructed on that lot. So what we did is we did a mock-up site plan of one of the lots and
Okay.
multiplied it by 28, and then incorporated the new public roadway that would be serving those. So it is a fairly general, it's a pretty darn good estimate of what the impervious would be.
Okay.
Yep.
the only other question I have, Peter, is I realize it's sketch, but do you have any topo of this property yet?
Yeah,
'Cause
we
that's
do.
one of the things that the road and other things kind of don't make sense without the topo, and it's not on anything you submitted.
This plan actually has the topography right here, where it shows that this area is a steeper location. That's kind of why we.
Oh, I was talking about, a 2-foot contour interval so that we could understand. I don't think,
This does have 2-foot contour intervals.
I didn't see it, but I offer my apologies. I'll go back through it again if I missed it.
The only
There
other-
was one.
one other thing, sorry, there, I think somewhere maybe in the EAF or somewhere else, it says that you need a core permit, but I don't think you need a core permit. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah.
I got one question. Water. I see that the project proposes a discharge of 12,320 gallons per day. And how did you come up with that calculation?
That calculation is based off of 4-bedroom house being the max build out at 110 gallons per bedroom. So 4 times 110 is 440, and then 28 times 440 is that 12,000 gallons. And that is not a discharge, that's a subsurface infiltration. It's going to be a common system with no discharge point. It essentially gets pumped to, again, a traditional septic system and then infiltrates into the ground. So again, that is another thing that is New York State DEC speedies, and we have to get a permit from DEC on that one.
Okay. I was just wondering how you came up with that calculation.
Yep.
Yeah, they use the standard.
Anything else, Ken?
I know this isn't anything that we should be talking about tonight, but just in response that the fronts of the homes are all put on by the general contractor, and we have no intention of making all these houses look like Levittown. They'll all have their own character. Hopefully, the timing of the sales of these houses, all of the homeowners will have input on colors and what they want and finishes. So please know that I wouldn't want to live in Levittown either.
Thank you.
Or would I want to build it, so we are keeping that in mind.
Anything else?
Yeah, so I guess from our perspective, I think the only thing we're looking for is direction on the board for this application on generating the finding statement. We're happy to flesh out all the additional information once we get into a preliminary final subdivision review. But first steps is obtaining this finding statement. So any guidance from the board that if you need any additional information for us to identify conservation aspects of the site, we'd be more than happy to provide.
What we've done in the past is basically the board would ask John and I to provide comments on the conservation analysis and any recommendations about either more information that's required or about leading to the preparation of conservation findings. If there's information that is, I think there is some information that needs to be provided before we could get to point of making a recommendation that it's complete. Need to know more about the size of the lot and get that issue resolved. Need to know more about what we're going to be doing with water and sewer. There's some key issues that I think we need some additional information on before we get to that point. In the meantime, if you'd like, we can look further at the conservation analysis that's been done and provide some additional comments, but I think it may be a little bit premature without that more basic information. That would be, I don't know, John, do you
I
agree?
think I did start looking at the conservation analysis. As I indicated, they did do a endangered species analysis. They did do an archaeological analysis. They did do a soils analysis. And they do show the treed areas. I think there's some information I'm going to need a little more on the stream and some of the things there. But for the most part, I think Paul's on the right track. A lot of this hinges on the acreage, and I do need that clarified and resolved. But for your next meeting, I'd be more than happy to work with Paul to generate basically any required additional information and perhaps an outline of what a conservation findings may look like.
Yeah, we can do that.
I'm going to send you some notes because I do have several comments on conservation.
Sure.
And one other thing, I'd like to congratulate you. Your history of the area going back to the migration from the land bridge in Asia, which it does basically say when the first residents 10,000 years ago were here, what went on from then until recently.
The archaeology report was fascinating.
It was
Yeah,
great.
it's
It was the
probably
most
better.
in-depth history of this town you could ever hope. So, thank you.
Glad you guys enjoyed it. We'll make sure Hudson knows.
Has that been submitted to SHPO, or are you guys submitting?
It's been submitted, we're still awaiting their.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hudson Cultural, they're quite good. You work with them.
I would say that just in terms of the direction for the conservation finding is that, you know, there is obviously a benefit to proceeding with the conservation subdivision, but fundamentally I think what you need to demonstrate as part of that narrative and part of the analysis is that you're conserving part of this property that deserves to be conserved. And the reasons for that conservation, the most important area, the reasons why, if they're agriculturally significant, whatever that is, but I don't think that point is quite made. There's a lot of narrative and analysis of avoiding sensitive areas, right? There are no archaeology, sort of the absence of that, but I think what you need to spend a little bit more time or focus on so that this board can make that finding is that the reason why we should move forward with this is because you're conserving important ecologically, environmentally, visually sensitive areas that deserve to be protected. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you gotta do this, right?
So, yeah, just to go over my to-do list, I think the biggest item is the certified survey to ensure that that acreage is correct. That's being the basis of design. And then what we'll do is we'll expand our conservation narrative to exactly what Nina said, is to go through and identify the very specific conservation benefits of our conservation areas that we are proposing.
And Peter, you got to make sure, a lot of the conservation areas are also septic areas, are also well set-aside areas. And there's going to be some storm drainage set-aside areas, one would assume. So you kind of might have to take a second look at that to make sure that you haven't packed the areas you're preserving with the elements that you need for your subdivision, when in fact they're looking to preserve them, so they shouldn't have something on them that's a requirement. So you might
Okay.
have to revisit that in a little more detail.
Understood. Yeah, just to point out too, we are preserving more than 50% of the property. So again, it's 59%. So we will adjust that calculation and expand it in our narrative.
Understood. And, you know, certainly a well protection area does serve double duty. That's not an issue. A septic area is a little iffy, you know, because that's a public utility. And stormwater management, depending upon what you're doing and what you're proposing, can be a benefit, can be an enhancement, can be, you know, an improvement to a conservation area, but all that's yet to be
Got it.
worked out.
We'll expand how it's aquifer recharge.
Okay, well, I'll leave it to you to be creative, my friend.
Hey, John, I took a wetlands webinar recently, and they talked about how 1 million areas of wetland were not properly mapped or mapped at all. And as of January 1st, all wetlands were going to be mapped under a new system by the state, and it was mandatory to use that new mapping. Is this something that you're familiar with or you're familiar with?
So we actually had the biologists go out and check for wetland. That's an on-the-ground person checking. Again, the only water body we have is Cascade Creek, and that's really it. The rest is farm fields and forested areas.
And what oftentimes you'll find, if the creek is well-defined, which I think this one is, the wetlands typically don't go much beyond the high water mark. So and then the rest of the site has been farmed for so many years, there's nothing upland. But yeah, that's going to be subject. The wetland biologist did do it because he did his turtle analysis and a few other things. Okay.
Peter?
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll be back.
Happy Christmas.
Yeah. Just a question. Will we be expecting consultant comments prior to a submission, or should we wait for those?
Well, you've got mine.
I got yours.
I'll probably refine them a little bit and issue them.
Okay.
But if we get to them, we get to them. If not,
It just seems like the process would be smoother for everybody if you waited until you got John and Paul's and any of the board members' comments before issuing another plan set, so we don't have this sort of rotating, you know, plan sets.
We've been down that route.
Yeah, that just is confusing to all of us.
Understood.
It wastes a lot of paper. So.
We can provide those for the boards at the next meeting, and then you can pass them along to the applicant.
It's right in the corner.
Does that make sense?
So we should anticipate showing up for the next meeting just so we can digest
We
these
can have a
comments?
little bit, and we'll
Okay.
get those to you in advance.
That's perfect.
We should have a survey.
Yeah, we'll try to get this, well, we'll hold on. We'll figure it out, but sounds good.
We'll
But you-
respond to what you've already provided.
you've got my draft to start
Yeah.
working, Peter.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Next is 11 subdivision of Amenia Union discussion. Here we go. You're up.
No.
I can, Mr. Chairman, I can kind of give you the highlights, if you
Yes,
will.
if you would, please.
Mr. Horton is here on behalf of the applicant to subdivide a large portion of property and create basically an 8-acre lot. Here is a copy of the survey. I did have it, Kirk, it's small size. And what had happened is, if you remember, we did a big lot line merger, lot line realignment for the Levins earlier on because they were working to put it in a conservation easement, farm easement, whatever. And Ms. Levin had come to me early on and said, hey, this is what we'd like to do. Conservation easement plus separate out this house. Because the house and the lot associated with it don't meet the zoning that it's in, there was some thought that that was going to take some time because it requires a variance. And so they wanted to complete the process for the conservation easement quickly because they needed to strike while the iron was hot and while everybody was in agreement. So we went through that process, we processed it, we've moved it on. They are now back to complete the thought. And what it is, and Mrs. Levin or Kirk, correct me if I'm wrong, they want to create an 8-acre lot. It is in the rural agricultural zoning district, so it requires 10 acres. It is immediately adjacent to the R zoning district, which only requires 5 acres, and even more so, it's next to a historic hamlet area. Now, the lot that they wish to create, I believe, is the main farmhouse and associated barns with it. And if you look at the way the configuration is between the farm fields and the hedgerows, it makes a natural subdivision, if you will. The lines kind of all follow the hedgerows, follow the stone walls, and it's kind of in keeping with the nature of what is going on around it. So basically, even though it doesn't comply with zoning, it makes sense as a subdivision. So in order to proceed, they need a variance from the ZBA. So what my recommendation is, if the board is willing to entertain this subdivision, is to make a positive referral to the ZBA and recommend they look favorably on this subdivision, because in point of fact, if you pull the wings off the fly, and pardon it, it makes sense, and it actually achieves a nice goal. It preserves a homestead parcel with appropriate surrounding lands and kind of meshes it with the surrounding and adjacent properties. Have I got it correct?
The only thing I wouldn't say it's the homestead. There's two houses on the property.
Okay.
This is just another one. It's actually the smaller of the two.
Okay, but it's been a historic house.
Yeah, it's an old house. I believe on the details on the parcel access, it says it was built in 1890, so.
And I would say that it's actually, Laurel, can you go to the mic?
You need to go to the microphone, please. State your name.
Laurence Levin. I would say this actually looks like it was part of the original hamlet of Amenia Union, because it's right there. It's across the street from the Shundy Grange Hall. It's next to all the little houses in that hamlet of Amenia Union. So the house and the barn that's associated with it was really almost separate from the rest of the farm. We just happened to buy it. It was included in the original lot for whatever reason that we purchased, but there's nothing about it that really associates it with the rest of the property. It's much more a part of the hamlet.
So, again, my recommendation would be that the board authorize Judy to prepare a brief memo to the Zoning Board of Appeals that says you've looked at it, it makes sense to you. Should the Zoning Board of Appeals look favorably on it, you would be inclined to move it forward as a subdivision.
We need a motion to send a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, I have a question before we move on. Okay, so if we approve a lot that's less than the standard 10 acres zoning, does that open up other, what we try to do is be consistent on the board.
We're not approving it.
We're not approving.
You're not approving
Yeah.
anything.
She has to go to the ZBA.
They have to go to the ZBA. If the ZBA allows them the ability to have less than the 10 acres, that's a ZBA responsibility.
Okay.
You can't approve anything. And if that application was in front of you tonight, my recommendation is, and the same as Mike Segelkin's recommendation, is you'd have to reject it. It's prohibited.
I saw that, okay.
So,
I'm just worried about future cases.
and that's why this one,
have an impact.
everybody has the ability to go to the ZBA. This one, quite honestly and frankly, makes the most sense of most of the applications that I've seen, because as the owner says, it meshes with the surrounding properties. It makes sense. It takes advantage of natural boundaries. And just by virtue of the fact that the way the stone walls in the property lays out, it's 8.1 acres instead of 10.
Okay. I wanted to throw that question out because I know we've gotten into trouble in the past when we've approved certain lots and it came back at us. So we just want to make sure we're consistent here across the board.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and I absolutely appreciate that, but one of the things the ZBA can take into account is the unique circumstances of a variance application, and that sort of avoids the issue of concerning precedent.
Okay. That was my question.
Okay, so I need a motion to have Judy send a letter to the zoning board.
I move that we send a letter as detailed by John.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so carries.
Jim, may I have my map back, please?
Yes.
Absolutely. I changed it for you.
Okay, I figured that.
All over.
So we're gonna send a letter to there, and they'll make a decision on what will happen, okay?
Thank you.
Thank
Other
you.
matters is 11:13:24 minutes.
The only thing that I noticed on the minutes was that there was a section in here that says, question was asked if this was about Da Vinci. A question was asked about if the sign proposal is in compliance with all of the code requirements for signs. John Andrews says yes, but that's not what John Andrews said. John Andrews said that Mike Siegelkin was reviewing the materials for compliance.
Thank you, yes.
You're welcome.
That's what he did, that's what I did say,
Okay.
Yes.
because I didn't do signs
Yes.
until this
So
one.
Judy,
So-
do you need my note here? Okay.
Do we need a motion to accept the minutes with the amendment?
I will make that motion.
We need a second. All in favor? Aye. To the residents of the town of Amenia, I want to say have a Merry Christmas and a very happy, safe New Year coming up.
Very good.
Our next meeting is January 8th, correct? Am I saying that? January 8th, Judy?
January 8th.
January 8th.
January
Okay.
8th.
This meeting is concluded.